Welcome to Talkin Tullahoma. In the studio with me today is Dr. Dan Lawson. Welcome, Dr. Docs. How are you doing?
Thanks. I am great, and it's always good to be here, so thanks for the invitation.
Well, you're a well-known face around town, but let's talk a little bit about that. How did you get to be so well-known besides just being the superintendent of schools?
You know, I think longevity is a big part of my reputation and why I'm here. Been here since 1997, which is a long time for a superintendent or a dog, and I'm both at times. So it's been a great ride, and of course had 3 kids who have been through the school system here, been involved in a lot of school programming, involved in civic activities, involved in church. So have a feel for and a connection with an awful lot of pieces of the community, and candidly, it's a community that I've grown to love dearly.
Oh, sure, and you've definitely immersed yourself in that community. Now, when you and Karen came here, about how old were you guys?
Well,
Karen doesn't want you telling her age on TV?
So I moved here as a 40-year-old superintendent.
Wow.
At that point in time, Board of Education really, don't think about it much today, but really kind of took a chance on a kid, if you will. I had 7 years experience as a superintendent in Missouri, so I started pretty young as a soup. And we started looking out of a belief that we wanted to move south for a few years. So I applied for a job in Texas, I applied for the position here, and I applied for one in Virginia. Candidly, I knew nothing about this area except for the fact that in the previous summer we had gone to the Olympics and stopped and stayed close and thought, you know, this is kind of a neat area, this has some allure, let's look, let's see. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So you and I came to this town about the same time because I'm from Atlanta and I came right after the Olympics. So, but it does grow on you. It's a place where you can kind of immerse yourself. So that is young. I don't think a lot of people realize how young that is for a superintendent. I mean, you know, because there's quite a bit of schooling that goes into becoming a doctor.
I think the combination of schooling and there's another component, and that component is the acquisition of some experience. There are an awful lot of folks who will spend a lot of time in the classroom, and I think that's great. But for me to recognize those goals that I had, I really had to jump in and acquire a principalship, and not so much from the sense of steps on a ladder, but from a sense of if I'm going to move to a next step, I've got to be competent at this level. So I became a principal and served in 2 high school principalships. With my second high school principalship, I realized I was spending a lot more time with other folks' kids than my own. So Karen and I made a decision that said, given the right opportunity, I think I'm going to pursue a superintendency. And at about that time, I'd finished my doctorate. So May of 1990 rolled along, and the superintendent in my hometown of Mountain Grove decided to retire. And he decided to do so at a very late date. And the school was kind of tasked with the responsibility of finding a new superintendent in a month or so. And I was quick to say, I'm here, let's do it. Not knowing the challenges that I would face or the limitations that I would have. But this, like a lot of things in life, is just about a willingness to jump in and do so, to understand that there are some things that you don't know, but work your tail off to overcome those things that you don't know, and work hard to learn and acquire. So the rest, as they say, is kind of history.
And I don't know if people understand, you know, the buck stops with you. I mean, you don't necessarily get all the glory, but you definitely get all the blame if you make a bad call.
That's the great thing about continuity and the ability of hiring a team that has great judgment, that has a knowledge of their business, a knowledge of our community, and a love for kids. Because when you hire those leaders at the building level or in the classroom who have those prerequisite skills, truly it makes a lot of our work celebratory. And that's what makes it a lot of fun. Now, certainly there are calls, there are challenges, there are concerns, and there needs to be someone who has that level of accountability, and I'm quite comfortable with that. But candidly, it's not all just phone calls complaining. There are a lot of folks celebrating great things about a great school system and community.
Oh, sure. I was amazed when I moved here because, I moved from a much larger city. It really, and that was probably just about the time I lived in Franklin County for about 10 years before I moved here. And so by 10 years, you sort of made it your own at that point. And I think it is one of the best school systems around. And I think it rivals what they have in Nashville, to be honest. So we're very fortunate here.
Well, I've been blessed by having a supervising corporate board that is really focused on the big issues of education. For the last 22 years, they have not been inclined to say, you need to look at this particular program or this particular challenge. They've been very global in their interest. They've been very protective of all segments of our student population, and they've been intent on providing programming that improves where we are as a school district, rather than suggesting who we ought to assign to a third grade classroom somewhere.
So how do you, in the 20 or so years you've been here, what's the main shift you've seen maybe in the education system as far as the students or the parents or, just the whole, thoughts of it?
Yeah, contrary to a lot of beliefs, the students are probably the most static component of what we do. The students aren't terribly different than students were when I was in school. Some are motivated and excited and really own their learning. Others are much more like I was as a learner, a little perhaps reluctant, but enjoyed the social dialogue and the sports component. I think that what we have to do as a school is find places to fit. Places where our kids are comfortable, places where they have an opportunity to flourish. And we have to have an understanding that not all will have the same interest or expectations. So for me, the students haven't changed dramatically in the last 30 years or so that I've been in this business. When I think about the expectations of boards, candidly, they want what's best for the kids that they represent, they want what's best for the community that they live in, and they want what's best for the future. So that really hasn't changed a lot. Candidly, the biggest change has been this. When I was first employed, I was employed for two purposes. One, I've indicated that I started late, so it was to occupy a seat. Secondly, though, I think there was a belief that we have a set of problems. Let's find someone with a skill set to solve problems, and perhaps with a willingness to think outside the box or stretch that capacity a little bit. In the last 20 years or so, the value of stretching capacity and thinking outside the box has been minimized a bit, and the expectation of compliance and accountability has really grown tremendously. We have been reluctant as a school district to put all our eggs in the basket of an assessment. And the reason for that reluctance is not about a concern that our kids don't do well. Instead, it's about a concern that kids have different giftedness, kids have different skill sets, and it's naive to suggest that everything that we do in school and everything that a kid knows can be measured on a day in May. So I think the idea of accountability and fitting into a box very tightly, as opposed to stretching those bounds, is how we've seen it change in the last couple of decades.
I agree, and I liked what you said, your farewell, that it's about teaching. It's not about teaching to a test. So.
Absolutely.
Well, we have to take a commercial break, but after this, we'll have some more exciting news from Dr. Lawson.
Cool off at Southern Middle Tennessee's newest water park, Tullahoma's Splash Island. Fun for all ages. 3 25-foot water slides, lazy river, fun water features for toddlers, tasty food items available. All this and more, only $5 from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 4 to 9 p.m. Sundays, 1 to 6. Join the fun at Tullahoma's Splash Island.
This is your internet service at 10 meg speeds. This is internet service at gigabit. No other local provider can match this level of speed. Call us today to get the world's fastest internet.
You wanna dance?
Check out Stingray Music on TV. Now available, the new Stingray Music mobile app, free with your TV subscription. Stingray Music, all good vibes.
Welcome back to Talkin Tullahoma. Well, Dr. Lawson, when we left, we were talking about thinking outside the box and critical thinking, and you're doing a little bit of that yourself now, aren't you?
You know, as I thought about the fact that it's time for me to hang up the spurs here and do something different, I also recognized very quickly that something different doesn't mean nothing. I can't imagine not being engaged mentally, not being engaged socially, not trying to add some value in some way. So I started thinking about, okay, what's the next chapter look like? And I kicked around the idea of being an interim superintendent, just going somewhere and serving for 6 months to a year at a time with communities that are candidly in a little bit of upheaval. And the priority would simply be to say, it's going to be okay. I've seen this before. It will be fine, and let's work through this.
Be a troubleshooter, so to
Absolutely. As I reflected more on that, I came to an understanding and it came to a peace of mind that said, if I want to be a superintendent anywhere, I want to stay here. I don't want to be a superintendent. I want to do something different. And I want to provide value, but it's not in the same chair and it's not in the same capacity. So as I thought about my skill set, what I do rather well is I remember the mistakes that I made and remember the stoves not to touch and the trips not to make. So I thought in terms of that skill set, since I remember those bumps and bruises and skills and challenges that I faced, maybe I could share those with others. So effective January, I'm transitioning to Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee. And my job there will be to teach those in a graduate program, especially those who are focused on leadership, want to learn more about what it takes to lead a classroom, what it takes to lead a school, what it takes to lead a district. And I won't necessarily be telling them what to do, but I'll spend a lot of time telling them what I did poorly so they don't have to repeat my mistakes.
Well, don't you learn best by mistakes?
Well, you certainly learn in a way that you don't forget. I wouldn't suggest that's best, but you don't forget those lessons.
Maybe that's what I was trying to say. The things that I did wrong are the things that I remember the best. Maybe that's what I meant to say.
Absolutely right. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I learned not to do those things again. So.
Yep. So Lee University is a small private school in Cleveland, Tennessee, and by small, it's got close to 6,000 students, third largest private school in the state of Tennessee. And their focus, one of their primary focuses is education. Those who don't know a lot about Lee would suggest that it's a spiritually based, Christ-centered school and really not much application to the outside world. And that's not true at all. Most of the students who complete the education program there end up serving in public schools. So there's a spiritual base to the school, but there's also an expectation of serving in a real world. And so I will start teaching in January and teach graduate students who will serve or are serving in schools right now, and teach graduate students hopefully to make their transition easier and more effective as they look at leadership of those schools.
So these are potentially future superintendents.
We're going to be looking at classroom teachers who aspire to become principals and those who would like to be directors and supervisors, and perhaps some superintendents out there, absolutely.
So and that's very nice. But as we talked about, thinking outside the box and bringing your bailiwick to this and sort of like helping people not make the same mistakes, or maybe also to help them realize successes a little easier too.
And I think for me there's a common interest, and that common interest is in the future. You know, those young people who are looking at being a principal, they have some expectations about the future, and they're hungry and motivated and excited about living up to those expectations. And likewise, I'm motivated and excited about equipping them to do so. So I really think it's going to be a fun transition. Obviously, there's a bit of reluctance about leaving a community that I love and a community that I've embraced, but it's 80 miles away. It's not forever away, so I'll certainly have some appearances back here and opportunities to stay connected with friends and folks that I love here.
So, and then maybe you can help the new guy with some YouTube videos when we have snow days, who knows?
You know, that will speak back to that issue of giftedness, and I would not suggest that I'm gifted in that regard, but I'm just not terribly shy. So I was willing to jump in, and I'm sure his giftedness will be in some other areas. And I'm confident that while he may not do videos, I'm confident that he'll bring some gifts that are world-changing to our community of education here.
I may have to encourage him to do one, have you guest star in that. So now a couple of the changes for you, big changes that aren't educational, you are going to have to drive. So it's going to be a bit of a hike.
So right now, my wife teaches at West Middle School and has been there for quite some time. Right now, she's going to finish this school year, and I will drive down on a couple of nights a week. If the weather gets bad, I've got a daughter that lives in Chattanooga, and I will stay over with Chandler, graze from her refrigerator, turn the heat on, leave the lights on, leave the TV on.
Don't forget to leave the windows open
That's
while
right.
the heat's on.
Payback time, just in general, provide some of those same things that she provided for me.
And I also noticed something missing here, no tie.
You know, I have been tasked with a tie as a part of our uniform for years and years and years and years. Had my last board meeting Monday night, and absent a couple of formal activities that I have to jump into, I think I've worn my last tie. It's and truly, when you're a guy and you think about this, I'm wearing a scarf that makes me more uncomfortable. It's not for warmth. It just makes me uncomfortable, and it restricts my movement. Why in the world am I doing that? So I'm not.
Well, we have to take another commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what the future holds for everybody, okay?
Sounds great.
All right, so stay with us.
It's time for every family and business in Tullahoma to go green and recycle. Tullahoma Public Works makes it simple and easy to recycle. Just place your recyclable materials, paper, plastic, aluminum, and cardboard beside your garbage container on the same day your garbage is picked up. Your recycled materials don't have to be in a fancy container. Recycling is not only the right thing to do, it makes sense. Recycling pays. Paying to bury our garbage costs each of us. Please do your part. Let's go green, Tullahoma, and recycle.
Does your family love to stream movies and use multiple Wi-Fi enabled devices? But are you finding out that your run-of-the-mill router simply can't keep up? Don't worry, LightTube has you covered with our internet router service for only $9.95 per month. Get back to what your family loves doing. Call us today at 455-4515 to learn more.
Hi, I'm Brandon Phillips with LightTube. I'm a fiber service technician. On a day-to-day basis, my main job is to fix whatever problems arise. A lot of the times, my main job is residential, commercial, service work, and installs. Anything from a minor to a major issue, problem that you might have, it's my job to fix it. I would be glad to help with any issues any way I possibly can. I'm Brandon Phillips with Tullahoma Utilities Authority, and I'm proud to serve you.
I have tremendously enjoyed having LightTube service my internet and phone needs for a busy medical practice. When we switched over from AT&T, I had suspected it would be a difficult transition. However, LightTube pleasantly surprised me. They were really knowledgeable, they serviced my needs, it was all seamless. They are hometown professionals who deliver on their promise. I've been very pleased with their service.
Welcome back. Well, this is the last part of our little talk show here. So is there anything that you wanted to bring up that we haven't discussed yet?
You know, I think the one thing I would like to share with folks that I have tried to share in every dialogue, this community more than 2 decades ago made me welcome and truly embraced ideas and embraced a prospect for change for a future. My effect here, both positive and negative, wasn't a solo party. It took a collaboration of a lot of shareholders. It took a vision in the community that says we're going to be more and we're going to make ourselves more. And it took some folks being perhaps a little uncomfortable at times. John Carver has been employed as a superintendent, and I think he'll do a remarkable job here as long as he's afforded the same respect and courtesy that I was afforded here, the same opportunity for success and for failure or two, with a knowledge that his work is going to be focused on what he can do to provide for a generation that he may never see. So I think that I would simply invite and expect the community to provide for John exactly the same thing that they provided for me. This is a place that wasn't home, but became home quickly. This is a place that could have been somewhat of a stepping stone for a young superintendent, but instead it served as a defining position in my life and in my career that can't be replaced. And I think the same can be provided for John. He has the same passion for the future, passion for our kids, and expectations for success. So I'm really looking forward to coming back 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now and seeing how we've grown and what's happened.
I think it will be very interesting. And that's something I wish we had touched on, that you were still relatively young when you came here in 40. It's just like that's the peak of a man's career. And you could have used this as a launch pad for even bigger and better things. And the fact that you stayed here for 20 years and raised your family here, I think speaks well of our community too.
It speaks very well of what could be offered here. It speaks very well of the support of a board. It speaks very well to the quality of teachers that I sent our 3 kids to glean from. And candidly, as we were thinking about experiences that our kids were offered, we just didn't want to run a risk by moving somewhere else. So Tullahoma provided for us a great educational opportunity, a great social opportunity, and it truly has become home, and we love this place dearly.
Well, and you know, you will always have a home here regardless of where you're teaching, so because you did a wonderful job the last 2 decades of establishing a good school system. And I'm like you. I've talked to Mr. Carver a couple of times. I believe that he's going to take your legacy and build on that and make it even greater. So I think when you come back, you'll be very pleased to see that you know your legacy continues. Maybe not exactly as you would have, but in a great way. You know, because everybody's vision's different.
And it shouldn't continue the way I would have. We have our own giftedness and we have our own models, and the expectations and the needs of the community 22 years ago are different than the expectations and needs today. And I think we've got a corporate board that does a great job. I think we have folks at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen who provide great leadership. We've got a visionary mayor. So when I look at the pieces in place for Tullahoma, I see opportunities that are tremendous and opportunities that are great. Some would suggest, then why the heck are you leaving? There are times that leaders understand they could be more effective in another capacity, doing something else, and being more fulfilled. This has been a great job, and truly, if I were going to be a superintendent, this is where I would want to be. But I'm ready for another chapter of life and really looking forward to that next chapter.
I hope you'll come back too, because we'd like to know, what kind of mark you make down there at Lee. I think that's very interesting, thinking about that you're going to be molding future Dr. Lawson, so to speak. And
I bet almost everybody hopes that's not the case.
I don't know. I think that the room where we did your farewell, what is that called? I can't think of it right now. The teacher where we had your farewell.
Oh, the board office. Yep.
Yeah. No, the auditorium.
I'm sorry.
Your send-off.
The auditorium there at the high school.
The teachers.
The convocation.
There
I'm
you
sorry.
go, the convocation.
I feel like a video game show. I need a buzzer.
The convocation. I think there were probably a lot of people that would argue that you are, differently a special person, and you left your mark on a lot of, teachers in that room.
I am a known quantity, and if nothing else, folks know that I dearly love this community, dearly love our kids, and an awful lot of the folks who were in that room were people that I've worked with for 20 years or more. In fact, I've got a couple of principals who were students as I transitioned here and are now back in leadership positions. So that level of continuity is something that you just don't get when you move every 2 or 3 years. It's truly a blessing, and it's also something that provides a lump in your throat as you think about leaving.
Oh, I know. I can't tell you how many teachers came up to me after that convocation, the word I couldn't think of, and said, he was superintendent when I was in school, and now they're teaching. So, yeah. I mean, you've left your mark on them, and so, the legacy will continue. So
it has been a lot of fun.
Well, it has been a lot of fun having you here today, and I'm going to miss you very much myself. So I hope you will come back, and we'll have to do another one of these and see how you're doing, okay?
That sounds great. Thanks, Jamie.
All right, well, thank you for
Appreciate it.
joining us today, and thank you for joining us today on Talkin' Tullahoma.